Not me, but my cousins lived in a haunted house. What made it creepier is that their house was an old house way out in the Oklahoma Panhandle. If you don't know, the Panhandle is just flat plains for hours. They said it was named Chuck, and the house was well known in the town they lived in. The previous owner, a guy named Chuck, had died in a triangle-shaped room at the top of the stairs. Apparently, he was fixing it up and hit some kind of gas leak which killed him. I hate that room and it felt very off. It's been a long time since they lived there, so I'll recount the stories I remember. One of my cousins was walking down the stairs, tripped, felt something grab her, and heard a man's voice say, "Watch out." Plenty of other times they would get locked out of the house. My grandma witnessed a spoon fly out of the sink as well. This was one of those old, deep sinks, so it didn't make sense. We only went up there once a year. But it never felt like you were alone. I'm sure there's more, but I can't remember.
Worked in an old firehouse and had heard stories of ghosts and strange happenings. The bunk rooms were on the second floor, and I slept in a small one with 2 beds that was for the medic crew. The driver slept downstairs, so I was alone. It was a small room, and the bed was pushed up against the wall, and I was laying on my right side facing the wall. I woke up when I felt a cold hand on my face and rolled over thinking I slept through the alert. There was the form of a woman in what looked like a nightdress, and it was cold in the room. I stared and I could see her entirely, but she was hazy. Then she just dissolved into the air.
Back in the 90s, my brother had a summer job at a local bowling alley. He was saving up to buy a car. He was pretty young at the time, so this was a great gig for him. Part of his job was to clean the place after hours. That meant making sure all the chairs were pushed in around the bar tables. The bowling balls were lined up in order by weight on the racks, stuff like that. He'd been working there for about a month with no issues. One morning, while he was cleaning, he worked early to get everything ready for the evening leagues. The PA system suddenly came on with a man's voice. He couldn't make out what the voice was saying, but he definitely heard it. It creeped him out a bit, but he figured maybe someone else had come into the building without him noticing. So he walked through the entire place to check. Nothing. It was completely empty, and everything was still locked up. At that point, he started to feel a little uneasy, but he went back to work. A bit later, while he was out on the main floor, he heard the sound of pool balls breaking, like someone had just taken a shot at one of the pool tables. He immediately turned around and looked over toward the pool area, and there was no one there. Not a single person. That was it for him. He called home. He was still living at home since he'd just graduated high school, and asked our dad to come down because he didn't want to be alone in the building anymore. He ended up finishing his shift, but from that point on, he never felt comfortable working there again for obvious reasons. Strange stuff kept happening now and then, though nothing quite like that day. He finished out the summer, but when the next year rolled around, he didn't go back.
My cousin claimed that when she was working at a dollar store in an old mall, that both customers and workers reported genuinely creepy stuff. Usually it was things like someone unseen running down the aisle and pushing past people, or a black figure peeking around corners or zipping by so fast that people thought they were just seeing things. The creepiest by far was one of the late-night stalkers, was pulling out old unsold inventory from the shelves and replacing them with new or updated products. And I guess she squatted down to pull out bags of expired dog food. And when she got to the last bag and pulled it out, she was greeted by a gray dude's head sitting there, chin resting on the shelf. He had a big grin on his face, like he was trying to scare her for laughs. She instinctively fell backwards and hit her head on the inventory cart hard enough to need stitches. The manager had a fun time trying to explain how the coworker was injured to their bosses. And to the insurance company, haha. Not sure if he added that she was startled by a dead dude's head poking out behind the dog food with a creepy grin on his face. That story actually reminds me of the ghosts of Flight 41, where planes were built with materials from a fatal crash, and both flight staff and customers reported incidents of seeing the dead pilots and engineer in odd places in the planes, like their head hiding amongst the luggage in the upper compartment, or their head appearing in a microwave and telling a staff member about a problem with the plane. Just creepy shit all around. Something about disembodied heads and other body parts is scary as hell to me. Why do they only appear as their heads? It's so unnerving.
Nothing too creepy, just weird. I worked in the basement of an old building, probably built around turn of the century. The building had been sold and everything above the basement was empty. We were working there temporarily. The elevator was supposed to be locked off, not going any further than the lobby, but occasionally Even though you would press the button to go down to basement or up to lobby, the elevator would take you up to the top of the building, which was the 7th floor. It wouldn't stop at any other floor, just the 7th. Then the doors would open to a huge empty room, dusty, scattered with boxes and old office furniture. Depending on the time of year, it could be quite dark when the doors opened, making it even creepier. Only happened to me a handful of times, but kind of scary because you didn't know what you'd see when the doors opened. Never saw anything. Oddly, this only happened to people when they were alone in the elevator. I wasn't the only one. It was an old, slow, creaky elevator too, so it took a while to get up to the 7th floor, which made my heart beat a little faster in anticipation of that door opening.
Mine is not exactly from a retail store, but rather from a janitor. We'll call him Jeremy, so Jeremy worked at an institution and was in good terms with the owner. The owner lent him a room to sleep. Even though Jeremy lived a few blocks away from the institution, he loved his job and would sleep over there. But after a few weeks, he documented some bizarre incidents. He'd hear footsteps coming from the staircase as well as from the adjacent room. He didn't think much of it until one night. He was in the bed but couldn't shake off the feeling something terrible was about to occur. Nevertheless, he fell asleep and later was awakened by a thud. Turns out a vessel was smacked by something with a huge force. He couldn't figure what could cause it, but nevertheless got inside his bed. It was then he heard a giggle of a child. It should be noted, this is happening during winters, and no child would be walking on a cold night, because they simply wouldn't be able to bear the coldness. Jeremy shone his flashlight across the room and checked each and every corner of the institution, but found no child. Then things got more creepy as every night he'd hear the same giggle, but in more numbers. In fact, he'd even see a faint apparition of 2 to 3 children sitting and playing on his room. Late at night, though he was never harmed, but it always left him on edge and would share us stories about it.